Welcome to our weekly news roundup. This week, we're talking about everything from the top levels of government right down to the AI in your web browser. The ground is definitely shifting.
And it all really boils down to one central question. When these new rules and new risks collide, who has to adapt? Is it on the government, big business, or does the pressure ultimately land on you and me? Let's get into it.
Okay, first up, we've got a massive shift in anti-discrimination rules coming straight from the Department of Justice. And you can bet its effects are going to be felt far and wide.
So, this new guidance from the DOJ has huge implications for, well, pretty much anyone who gets federal money. Universities, government contractors, nonprofits. The big change here is that the government is signaling it's not going to wait for complaints anymore. It's going to start actively looking for what it now considers discriminatory practices.
So what exactly is now in the crosshairs? Well, the memo flags 4 specific things. First, you've got preferential treatment, like requiring diverse slates for hiring. Then there's segregation, which they say could include certain race-based affinity groups. They're also targeting what they call proxies. Things like a mandatory diversity statement that could act as a stand-in for someone's personal views. And finally, they're taking a hard look at training programs that promote stereotypes, even using terms like toxic masculinity as an example.
But it's not just a list of don'ts. The DOJ actually lays out a new playbook of do's. And the core idea? It's a big shift away from demographics and towards skills. They want everything focused on measurable, job-related criteria. And they're telling organizations to really double-check that their so-called neutral requirements aren't just proxies in disguise. It's a pretty clear move from quotas toward merit.
And here is the absolute key takeaway. The laws on the books, they haven't changed one bit. But what has changed are the enforcement priorities. The government is now hunting for different things. And believe me, for anyone taking federal dollars, that changes the game completely.
So, if that's how the old rules are changing, what's happening with risks from brand new technology? Well, these next 2 stories show that whether we're talking about your personal data or your AI assistant, the dangers are evolving, and fast. Let's start with a huge cyber attack on Bouygues, one of France's biggest telecom companies. So, how many customers got hit? A staggering 6.4 million.
Okay, so there's a little bit of good news and some very bad news here. The hackers did not get passwords or credit card numbers, which is great, but they did get contact info, contract data, and the real jackpot for them, international bank account numbers or IBANs. That's basically a scammer's dream toolkit for setting up all kinds of fraudulent payments.
Now, a data breach is a threat we kind of get by now. But at the exact same time, the U.S. Government Accountability Office, the GAO, is sounding the alarm on a much sneakier danger, the way we're all starting to use artificial intelligence.
And this just perfectly nails the problem of what's called AI hallucination, right? You ask a good human lawyer a tough question, they're going to say, well, it depends. But ask an AI chatbot, and just to be helpful, it might literally invent a fake legal case out of thin air that just happens to prove you're right, and it'll serve it up to you with 100% confidence.
The GAO's report really breaks these risks down. Beyond just making stuff up, that's the hallucination part, AI also tends to be a yes man, a problem they call sycophancy. It just agrees with you instead of being a critical tool. You add its overconfidence to the mix, and you've got a tool that can be completely, confidently wrong. But maybe the biggest risk of all? Your chat history isn't private. It can be subpoenaed and used against you in a lawsuit.
This whole game of adaptation isn't just happening in tech. The world of finance is also constantly shifting. We've got 2 new rule changes that'll affect everyone from the big traders on Wall Street to small businesses just trying to get a loan.
First up, Wall Street. Regulators just gave a little breathing room to firms that handle those super complex things called swaps. Before, if they found any error, no matter how small, they had to rush to file paperwork about it. The new rule is basically, don't bother us with the small stuff. Now, they only have to report an error if it's a big one, affecting more than 5% of their trades. The point is to focus on fixing the problems, not just filing more forms.
All right, so let's jump from Wall Street all the way to Main Street. Louisiana just rolled out a new law for something called a merchant cash advance. That's where a business gets cash up front and in return pays it back with a slice of their future sales. But what makes this law really interesting is the twist. And the twist is what's missing. See,
Other states have laws like this, but they're usually full of loopholes. They might not apply to banks or to deals over a certain dollar amount. Louisiana's new law, it has 0 exemptions. None. Nada.
And that simple change means everything. Now, any provider has to give a business a crystal clear price tag on the financing. And unlike everywhere else, this applies to everyone. Doesn't matter if you're a huge bank or a small online lender. It doesn't matter if the deal is for $5,000 or $5 million. Everybody plays by the exact same rule.
Okay, for our last regulatory shift, we're going to move from the complexities of finance to something you probably have in your fridge right now: orange juice.
The FDA is proposing a tiny, tiny change to what can legally be called pasteurized orange juice. They want to lower the minimum required sugar content, which is measured on something called the BRICS scale, from 10.5% down to 10%. It seems minuscule, right? But there's a really big reason for it.
So why on earth would they bother with such a tiny change? The answer is simple: money. The FDA estimates that this little 0.5% tweak could save juice makers over $50 million a year. Every year.
And the real goal here is to support American citrus growers. Between things like citrus greening disease and just plain bad weather, it's been getting harder for U.S. oranges to meet that higher sugar standard. This change makes it easier for companies to use domestic fruit, which helps the whole supply chain. Don't worry, the FDA says you shouldn't taste any difference in your morning OJ.
So, when you put it all together, new enforcement at the DOJ, the weird risks of AI, even the sugar in your juice, you see the exact same pattern. The rules are all scrambling to keep up with reality. Which brings us right back to where we started. In a world that's changing this fast, who really needs to adapt the quickest? The governments? The businesses? Or is it us?